exactly whatever we want to do. And do you know why? Because we're young ones. Bachelor boys. Crazy, mad, wild-eyed, big-bottomed anarchists. Look out! Cliff!
Hi everyone, it's James here. Compliments of the season to you. Welcome to my Christmas video for 2019. Going to do a topic which I've long been meaning to do, but just never got round to it, so I thought I would do it now. So we're going to look at Cliff Richard. This is a great record I picked up about 2 or 3 years ago. This is the soundtrack to The Young Ones, one of his movies that he made in the 1960s. Beautiful mono copy of it. Let's have a look at the record. There we go. Green Columbia. Isn't that beautiful? So yeah, Cliff Richard, often associated with Christmas here in the UK, due to a long string of Christmas records over the years, you know, many of which are reasonably average and different. Some of them are okay. Cliff Richard has virtually no credibility whatsoever. I mean, I checked before I did this video to see if anybody had ever done a Cliff Richard collection video, vinyl video. I couldn't find one. It's possible that I've missed one somewhere, but you know, I guess Cliff Richard, there's a few things that stand against him. He always had a very clean-cut image. He never had any sense of subversion to his music. He had no interest in trying to push boundaries. Crucially, he was not perceived as having been part of the British invasion when the Mersey sound broke big in '63 and '64, and the Beatles and the Animals and the Stones and all those bands went to America. Cliff was not embraced as part of that scene for the simple reason that he'd been around for a few years before. I mean, he was the original, or one of the very first original British rock and rollers. You know, his original hit, Move It, was an absolute classic. But already, by the time the Beatles came along, he was seen as being a bit passé, a bit middle of the road. Certainly very, very clean cut. And throughout the 60s, after the Beatles broke big, he really did struggle for any kind of credibility whatsoever. He did the Eurovision Song Contest. He got more heavily into religious music, which, you know, is perfectly valid, but it kind of marginalised him, I think, to an extent. But then what happened in the mid-1970s, he had this kind of amazing comeback, this pop comeback, with a little bit of rock credibility to it. And that's the period that we're going to look at in this video. So the first record where this kind of started happening was this one. This is from 1976, and it's the album I'm Nearly Famous. And this record saw him team up with Bob Welch, who had been in the Shadows, and Bob produced this record and chose the material for it. This one is on the red EMI label, as lots of Cliff's records were. That was the other big thing about Cliff Richard, that you know, in the main he didn't write his own songs, so he never really had that credibility. But this record was the first one that he'd made in quite a long time that was critically acclaimed. You know, it was kind of seen as having some really good, strong commercial material on it, a little bit harder edge. I mean, Cliff is a lightweight artist. Let's not, you know, try and pretend otherwise. His stuff is reasonably light. It's reasonably fluffy. It does generally appeal to, you know, housewives and, you know, people who are not into punk rock and experimental music. I mean, the cover kind of says it all. Doesn't really do justice to the album. It's just very kind of soft focus and fluffy, and Cliff is insufferably clean cut. I think that's one of the main things that people held against him. This record was very successful. It came out in May 1976. It was seen as a comeback, and the lead single on this album is Miss Unites, which is an absolute classic pop single. Got to number 15 in the UK singles chart in early 1976, followed by the sort of awesome disco song Devil Woman, which is still a great pop song. I mean, you know, it sounds great to this day, and it was a slightly harder edged kind of song that people were used to from Cliff. It peaked at number 9 in the UK, that's Devil Woman. It became his first US top 10, reaching number 6, and it earned a gold disc for sales of 1 million. So this period starts a period where Cliff does start to kind of encroach into the American market finally, having never had any success, prior to that. This one is Every Face Tells a Story, and let's have a look at the inner for this one. These records can be picked up in charity shops in England for £1. Cliff is one of those artists. He's a bit like David Essex, he's a bit like Leo Sayer. His stuff is not valued or treasured at all, really. So you can pick these albums up really, really cheaply. They're not always in the best condition, but you can find them quite easily. 1977, this album peaked at number 8. It spawned 3 hit singles, they being Hey Mr. Dreammaker and My Kind of Life, which is a nice upbeat pop song, and the third single, When Two Worlds Drift Apart, which is a bit more of a kind of soppy ballad. He did do his fair share of soppy ballads, really. Okay, then the next album, which came out in 1978, this one was a bit of a flop. This one is Green Light, and there were three singles from this album, none of which charted. Green Light itself was the third single, didn't chart, and the others were Please Remember Me and Can't Take the Hurt Anymore. It's a perfectly nice album. It's a bit kind of fluffy and soft-centred, as all Cliff Richard albums are, but it's a bit lacking in strong singles, really. I think this record. It's got some good album tracks, but it kind of interrupted his run of hit albums during this period. So there's the label for Green Light. And again, this one is produced by Bruce Welch. Now the song Green Light on this, I think it might be the first song that was written for him by Alan Tarney, who is going to feature in the Cliff story much more as we get into the next couple of albums. So Alan Tarney is a pop songwriter, producer. He's got some quite good credible pop credits to his name. He produced Saint Etienne, and he also did some production work with Aha as well. And what happened was, for the next album, Cliff decided not to work with Bruce Welch anymore. This album was actually produced by Cliff himself and his long-time songwriter Terry Britton, and they teamed up together with this on this record. This is Rock and Roll Juvenile, and there were some songs on this record that were co-written by B.A. Robertson. So B.A. Robertson was a songwriter who was kicking around in the 1970s. He wrote some lyrics for Cliff and on this record, and they were very successful, and then he enters the story later. Now this record was kind of an attempt to show Cliff back in his rock and roll roots, really, which is often forgotten, that he was the original British rock and roller. I think that had largely fallen by the wayside due to how many soft-censored songs he'd done over the years, all the ballads and things like Congratulations. People had lost sight of him, really, as any kind of rock star, rock musician. But you can see from the cover that, with the guitar and everything, he was kind of making a pitch again, really, I suppose, to be considered some kind of person who did rock and roll music. But the catch with this record is that it ended up featuring a song written by Alan Tarney called We Don't Talk Anymore. Now Cliff didn't want this song on the album because it was totally different in style from the rest of the album. This album is very guitar driven, reasonably raw, by Cliff standards. But We Don't Talk Anymore was this fabulously glittery, poppy, kind of soft, confectionery kind of pop song. I mean, it was a big hit, but Cliff didn't want it on the album, but he did actually capitulate in the end. The song went on the album, and in America I think they had to rename this album We Don't Talk Anymore. So it got to number 3 in the charts, this record. It was in the charts for 21 weeks in the UK. His biggest ever hit single was We Don't Talk Anymore. It got to number 1, and it was also a hit in America as well. In the UK it reached sales just short of 1 million, and in fact it was a big hit worldwide as well. And Cliff started to get some success in America at this point, even though he'd never been accepted in the British invasion. Strangely enough, by 1979 he started to get airplay at the same time as some of the new wave artists, people like Joe Jackson, Squeeze, people like that, kind of, the more poppy end of new wave. Because of that single, Cliff actually started to get airplay in America, and his tours started to get bigger in the States. That's a really good album. Right, sorry, I'm just going to cut in because I forgot to mention the greatest song of Cliff's career, which is on this record, the song Carrie, which was a co-write with B.A. Robertson again, and it's just a fantastic song. If I was going to compile a list of my top favourite 30, maybe even 20 British pop singles of all time, Carrie would definitely be in there. It's a hugely atmospheric song. It sounds a bit like Marvin Gaye, Heard It Through the Grapevine. It's got that kind of urban pop, soul, funk sound to it, a bit of R&B in there, and it's a great lyric. It's really ambiguous. It's sung from the point of view of someone who's talking about this girl Carrie, but it's not kind of clear who she is and what her relationship is with the singer of the song. It's just got a real great kind of emotional ambiguity to it, but it's just a great pop song. It's got just a brilliant hook, masterful arrangement. I think it shows Cliff at the absolute top of his game in 1979, and I don't think he ever equalled it after that, really. Anyway, I totally forgot to mention it when talking about the album, so cut back out to where we were before. Now, because of the hit We Don't Talk Anymore, which she'd done with Alan Tarney, the next record was much more of a consistent collaboration with Alan Tarney. This one is I'm No Hero, and quite a few of the songs are co-written or written by Alan Tarney and produced by Alan Tarney as well. Actually, the whole album is produced and arranged by Alan Tarney. So, critically, this record didn't get a great reputation. It was seen as being a bit one-dimensional, but it's got some good songs on it. It's got the song I'm No Hero, Dreaming, which was a big hit single. Let's get some facts for you. So this was 1980, and it made number 4 in the UK charts. Dreaming was a hit single. A Little in Love was a hit single. They were both top 20 hits in the UK and in the US. A good fun album. It's a nice listen. I do like Alan Tarney's production. It's very much of its era. It's got that kind of very radio friendly, kind of warm, early 80s kind of synth sound. Just nice sounding music. Very unpretentious. Okay, so the last one I'm going to show you, this is his hit album Wired for Sound. Just good timing because it's now playing in the background. Again, this was arranged and produced by Alan Tarney. This one came out in 1981, and this spawned an absolutely huge hit single in Wired for Sound. It was right at the advent of the age of the Sony Walkman. The video for it had Cliff walking around with his earbuds in, with his Walkman. It was definitely a song which captured the zeitgeist, I think, of its time. And this one contains the song Daddy's Home, which was a really big hit, and Wired for Sound itself, which is an absolutely fantastic record, I think. Let's get some factoids for you for this one. August 1981, it peaked at number 4 in the UK album chart, spent 25 weeks on the chart in 1981 and 2. It went platinum, and it featured that song Daddy's Home, which was a cover of Shep and the Limelight's 1961 US doo-wop hit, Daddy's Home. Also, actually, this album contains the song Broken Doll, which is a great version of a song by Reckless Eric, which came from 1980. So, here we go, Wired for Sound. Now, after this, Cliff did have some more reasonably credible albums. He did another couple of albums. In fact, in the mid-1980s, he teamed up again with Alan Tarney and did at least another one album with him, but I don't have that one. After that, I think Cliff's career kind of went down a much more mainstream route. I mean, these albums are all quite mainstream albums, but he became much more mainstream and went into the realm of he did a lot more Christian music. He started doing all the Christmas records, and this great little sort of golden period of good pop rock records kind of fell by the wayside, I think, and disappeared into his history to an extent. But I wouldn't describe myself as a huge Cliff fan. I've got those records because I'm aware of their significance, I suppose, to mainstream pop music in the 1970s and early 80s, and I do enjoy them, so I've got them in the collection. They're nice, cheap records, you can pick them up really easily, and they're always enjoyable to listen to, so yeah. I thought I would give Cliff his due because nobody ever seems to mention him. I suspect I'll come in for a bit of flack for this video. Some people will just think, what on earth is he doing talking about Cliff Richard, but tough, I'm a fan of pop music, I like mainstream pop music, I don't think there's anything wrong with Cliff at all, so just wanted to give him a little shout. So there we go, hope you enjoyed the video. Merry Christmas. See you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Phew! That was close!